Hello. So today I want to talk about why first impressions don't last, especially when it comes to intimate relationships. This is really important because a lot of us actually go into intimate relationships, and especially if we've had past failed relationships in our perception, we may be coming into a date or a relationship showing our best side. And while you do have some of the characteristics that you may exhibit in your best side, you also have a side of you that is not always best. And so what happens in the initial stages is that we actually wear a mask, and in order to get the love of the other side, or in order to get accepted, in order to feel approved by the other side, we say, I'm going to show my best side. Now, this is a really dangerous problem to have in a relationship, because what happens is we are showing the best side. We actually get into this game of our animal brain. Our animal brain wants to seek and gratify instantly. And it is the oldest part of our brain. So the game of the animal brain is, let me seek and satisfy my hunger. Let me seek and satisfy my emotional hunger in this case, which is, I want to be accepted, I want to be loved. And everybody wants to be accepted and loved. But in that process, if we decide to wear a mask and not be authentic, then that's a dangerous problem to have in a relationship, because you're only showing a part of you and hiding the other side of you. And this is why a lot of relationships actually get in trouble, because we somehow have this notion in our heads that we're always going to be kind, that we don't have an edgy side to us, that we don't have a cruel side, that somebody who's kind will never get angry. So we have all these constructs that have been imposed on us. And where have they been imposed? Well, if you go back to the roots of your childhood and how you grew up in a family structure to be accepted, and maybe even in your cultural environments and in your social environments, you may find out that you were asked to behave in a certain way in order to be accepted and to buy your survival. Now, the moment you traded your authenticity in order to survive, in order to be accepted, you already compromised yourself. So this might have looked something like you were a child, something that your mom or dad asked us, or your teacher asked you to do something, and you didn't want to do it. So you threw a hissy fit, got angry and mad, and started crying. And then somebody told you are not to cry, and beat the crap out of you. I'm just giving an example. This may or may not be exactly but what happened to you, but you get the picture. Now, what happens is suddenly the message to you was, you can't be yourself. You are not allowed to exhibit the whole range of emotions you're experiencing right now. Therefore, go ahead and suppress the part of you and only show the side of you that will get accepted, essentially. Now, we are not one-sided human beings. And some of our parents had pretty interesting parenting skills. I'm not going to judge it, because there are benefits to that as well, which is not the topic of our discussion today. But suffice it to know that the parenting skills were interesting, in that they probably got this type of parenting skill from their fathers and mothers. And so it's really what I call epigenetics. These are templates or generational hand-downs that your parents have inherited, which they passed on to you knowingly or unknowingly. And so now you had to trade your authenticity in order to survive your childhood. Over time, this became a habit. You made it a habit of trading your authenticity in order to be accepted, in order to buy your survival, in order to be even loved to some extent. So this puts your brain in what I call survival mode instead of thrival mode. When you trade your authenticity in order to survive, you are in survival mode. Some of us have been running these stories since our childhood. And so if you're on the conscious path, much of the conscious work is really about integrating some of these disowned parts of you and bringing them back within yourself and balancing them out. So the reason we have problems in the relationship is because we hide the part of us that didn't get approval when we were children coming into the relationship, which is intimate now. This is the intimate relationship, and we take that same pattern and apply it to our intimate relationships. Now, the danger in this is when we only show a one-sided view of us, we set the false expectation with our partner that we're going to be one way all the time. And the reality is you can only act and pretend for that long before you start to slip back into your old ways and to start to show sides that are not authentic to you. So at some point in your relationship, you're going to start to perhaps show a side of you that gets angry if you've hit that side. Perhaps you're going to show a side that wants to throw a hissy fit, wants to cry. And so what I want you to get is that these are all parts of you that you have disowned that are now going to be called back within you, especially in an intimate relationship, because an intimate relationship is actually asking you to step into maturity, not to remain as a child, as a juvenile, but actually to step into your own maturity. This is what the calling of an intimate relationship is. So the mirror is going to be put in front of you through your partner, who is going to directly or indirectly, consciously or unconsciously, trigger you to see the part of you that you have pushed away. They don't know that this is the part that you've pushed away in your childhood, so they're going to do it inadvertently. And now when they do it, you're going to get triggered as you did as a child, except you are now trying to break free of your childhood dynamics. So it's going to be like, what the F is going on? I'm facing the same thing again. I can't keep up the charades anymore. So the pretenses in the initial stages of knowing somebody, perhaps you call it dating, whatever you want to call it, and even in the initial stages of the relationship, the honeymoon period, as a lot of people call it, things are going fine and dandy, you're very impressed with each other, and then suddenly, boom, the arguments and the fights start to build up, and before you know it, you are at loggerheads with this person, and you're wondering what's going on in the relationship. The reality is all the relationship is showing you is that you have been inauthentic, and it's a calling for you to become more authentic. But you are stuck because you're comparing the relationship you have now with this person to the previous relationship or the relationship you had with this person at the start of the relationship. And time has moved on, but you have not. Now it's showing you that formula or strategy that you developed as a child to avoid facing the part of you that was disowned and facing your own rejection is not going to work. So this can be a challenging emotion or feeling to experience within yourself. This is the inner child part of you that's actually been wounded. And so you're hiding this part of you in the hopes that you won't get rejected for that part. But instead, you are actually unconsciously surfacing that rejected part of you so you can get rejected again and learn from your rejection. So this is the key to what I'm going to lead you toward in the next couple of minutes here. So once you start to become aware of what your core dynamic is in a relationship and how you actually buy love in the beginning stages of a relationship, you can now become a little bit more conscious around your core pattern. Your core wounding that occurred, for example, it could be a fear of abandonment. So a client of mine was experiencing deeper abandonment issues as a child. And I'm just going to say he, for the sake of convenience. What he did was to dress this up in the form of getting into a relationship. And the moment it didn't feel comfortable, he'd say, this is not working out for me, and jump right out of the relationship. But the real root of the problem was in his childhood. And he was not recognizing, in his own innocence, he wasn't recognizing where it was coming from, why every relationship was turning out the same way over and over and over again. So how that would manifest is, in the beginning, he would be very attentive to the woman, get her attention. And the moment things began to go south, he would distance, the moment the relationship got comfortable, he would start to distance himself a little bit in the relationship. Of course, the woman would pick this up and wonder what was going on in the relationship. And she would be like, well, you're not paying any attention to me anymore. Well, who's creating this dynamic? He is, for himself. About her, that's a different story altogether. But with regard to him, he's the one that's responsible for creating this dynamic in his life. So what does one do when this happens? The first thing you must do is you must have a belief shift, right? And a belief shift has to be around that your old habits do not serve you anymore, because you've been trying this. And if you really are wanting to learn and grow out of it and stop abusing yourself and stop tormenting yourself, then you're going to have to change your belief system and say, well, something I've been doing in the past has not been working. And now I need to look at how I've been doing it in the past and what may be causing it, and shift that so that I can actually get in a relationship that's more nurturing. Deep down, this client of mine wanted a good relationship, but every time he hit this wall in a relationship, he said, well, it's happening yet again. I'm going to get out of the relationship. So he was hopping from relationship to relationship without any awareness that it was he who was causing his own nightmares. So now, with the belief shift that it is actually inside of him, the nightmare is actually inside of him, he can now shift it. So one of the ways to shift it is to really go back into the childhood, into the episodic memory where the event occurred, if that's possible, that caused him to have a shift in belief that he could not, in this sense, expose himself emotionally, be more vulnerable and open, sharing his anger or his fear of abandonment or whatever that looks like, and step back from that and see how it's not serving him right now, how it may have been serving him in the past, but how it's not serving him anymore, and to see the drawbacks of holding that pattern going forward, whereas in the past, he had seen it as an advantage. So I want to get a little bit deeper into this advantage and drawback thing that I'm talking about. So human beings will never do something unless they perceive an advantage to doing it. So in this case, his perceived advantage was that he didn't have to show himself. He didn't have to reveal himself, and therefore he could avoid his rejection. So now on the other side, he's got to see enough drawbacks to living like that, that he will be willing in his own psychology, in his mentality, to let that belief system go. So we have to look at the drawbacks of holding on to that previously held belief that somehow he's going to be rejected for being who he is, and finding enough drawbacks attached to his core values, which means he has to be 100% clear on what his core values are. And from there, we can now start to slowly look at what the drawbacks would be if he continued that behavior into the future. And once we can do this, there are other facets that will come in play. But overall, if we can at least start seeing the drawbacks to that old behavior, we can start to loosen up some of this childhood stuff that is pulling us toward recreating the dynamics we had with our parents in our adult relationships. And we can step into a new way of thinking and acting that is different than in our childhood. So we can start to grow our emotional maturity. We can start to grow our intelligence, relationship intelligence or relational intelligence. And we can start to step into a more confident version of ourselves, which does not doubt our ability to attract partners and to retain partners. This is how we can take some of our past suffering from our previous relationships, whether they're childhood, mom and dad parental dynamics, or whether they are teacher dynamics or cultural dynamics or social dynamics, and then shift them in our intimate relationship. So our intimate relationship can now become the safe space for us to start to release some of these older patterns and held beliefs that we've had that are no longer serving us. Of course, this assumes that you are going to be selective in finding a partner who will want to enjoy that or create that safe space with you. Or optionally, you would work with a therapist or a coach like myself to actually release these old patterns so that they don't run you. Now, you'll be surprised because how it runs in the intimate relationship, we can see the surface very quickly because in intimate relationship, we're spending a lot of time with somebody in close proximity. But the reality is these type of patterns also impact our professional relationships. We actually run on these patterns and impact every area of our life, professional and personal. So when we can start to see the drawbacks to the old way and the advantages to the new way of being, we can start to budge some of these old stubborn patterns that are continuing to run us and step into a whole new way of being. Now, especially when we do this with dedication to ourselves and to the relationship or the partnership that we're in, we can start to truly shift the dynamic within ourselves and create a new way of thinking and acting in our relationship. This is when we actually become sovereign and we get our authenticity back. We stop wearing masks. We stop pretending that we are somebody else, and we're not afraid to show the side of us that gets hurt, the side of us that is strong, the side of us that's vulnerable, the side of us that's flexible, the side of us that is tough. All of the sides are within us. All 4,600 plus traits are within us. So we might as well bring them all to home, give them a home where we are very conscious and aware of when they surface and move from a disowned platform to a sovereign and owned platform within ourselves. And this is the gift of doing your relationship shadow work as opposed to just being spiritual or, just doing general shadow work. It's very specific to how you operate in a relationship. And that is the gift when you can go deeper within and start to remove the crud that has been sitting there and open your heart more. Your relationship starts to feel more open. There's more trust and confidence in the relationship. Happy